الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغر الميامين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين الحجة ابن الحسن المهدي فداه أرواح العالمين. One of the fascinations that human beings have always had is their love to acquiring news. It's always been a fascination to switch on the radio, turn on the TV, get online, pick up the paper, and read news. The reason we like to get more and more news, and even though human civilization has evolved and advanced, and the means of communications have really changed with the advent of new technology, this fascination has always stayed intact. We've always liked to have more and more news. And the reason behind that is because, first of all, we'd like to be kept informed about the events that take place around us. We would like to know what's happening around us because either directly or indirectly, they affect our lives. We'd like to know, for example, how much the oil prices have fluctuated in the last 24 hours, because that, in effect, changes the price of petrol that I consume in my car. I'd like to know the latest about, tax deductions or laws that have been enacted in Parliament, because that affects my life, either directly or indirectly. So we would always like to be kept informed and updated about these pieces of information. The problem is, however, that sometimes the news we get fed in to our minds through TV, radio, newspaper, the internet, and so forth, not all of that news is useful. Sometimes some of the pieces of information and news we get are simply interesting to know about. We would like to know what's happening in Cambodia, even though that doesn't affect me in any way whatsoever. I'd like to know what's happening, for example, in the remote islands of the Caribbean and how they look and, for example, their political system and so forth, or if they've just had a revolt or something. I'd like to know that, even though it doesn't affect me in any way whatsoever, because it's simply interesting. Because we would like to accumulate more and more knowledge, even though the knowledge is useless. Someone can go out there and spend years and years memorizing an entire encyclopedia, but at the end of the day, how much of that information is able to be translated into useful things in the physical world that benefit my body or my soul? Not much, to tell you the truth. Some of that is useful, but most isn't. Yet we still like to have more and more news. The interesting thing about the word news, if you go back to the Arabic equivalent of the word, in Arabic, news is referred to as naba. Naba is the Arabic equivalent of the word. Now, it's really, really fascinating to know that none of the news anchors, the people who deliver the news on TV or on radio, they are never called Nabi in the Arabic language. Why is that? People deliver news to us. They gather the news, they go take pictures, they film the events that take place, they do all sorts of things. They spend millions and perhaps billions of dollars gathering news and then delivering that news to you and I in our homes in the comfort of our couches. Yet we never call them Nabi. Nabi literally means a person who brings you news. Why are they called Nabi? Because that word is specifically designed to address messengers and prophets. Why, I ask you, is it that we call messengers and prophets Anbiya or Nabi? People who bring us news. What is it that they bring to us that makes us called a Nabi? What's the information? What's the news brought to us by prophets and messengers and apostles and imams that makes us called a Nabi? It's the greatest news of all. It is information, it is news, it is knowledge about the beginning and the end. 124,000 prophets, as I said in the previous nights, each one with 12 successors, totaling something more than 6 million people. They have been sent, dispatched by the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come to us and to deliver us this short piece of news. This piece of information that can probably be referred to as the worst kept secret in life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to know about this. As simple as it sounds, God happens to send 6 million people delivering it to us. God sends those 6 million people, each enduring so much pain, so much misery. There have been prophets who are killed and then had molten lead poured into their eyes, into their eye sockets. There have been prophets who have died out of hunger and thirst. If you read the stories of prophets and messengers, it is unbelievable the amount of endurance and the amount of pain that they had to go through. What for? To tell you and to tell me that you had a beginning. Again, as naive and simplistic as that sounds, it's important to know. We had a beginning. We were created. We were brought into this world without our permission. None of us ever had to sign a consent form and say, I'm okay with being brought into this next world. We never had to do that. And just as we never signed a consent form to come into this world, we'll never be asked to sign a consent form to be taken out of it. We'll be taken out of this world no matter what. No matter you like it or not. This world is nothing but a station. And in a station, you stay for a short amount of time. It's like when you're traveling overseas and you go to the airport, you have a departure lounge. What you do is you go to the departure lounge, you're expected to stay there for about half an hour, 2 hours. If you're lucky and rich, you pay a little more, extra money, and you're taken to a VIP lounge or something, or a business class lounge. But you only stay there for half an hour, or an hour, or 5 hours max. And you treat the place as such. You never think of that place as your second home. You never sit there and start gardening. You never sit there and start cleaning up, because you know in half an hour's time you'll be boarding the plane and going to your final destination. You're not staying in the departure lounge for good. This is the world we're living in right now. You come here for a short while and you're forced to leave. Now, having that type of unclassified information in our possession, knowing that we had a beginning and that we will have an ending, everybody knows that. Having that kind of information, what gives us hope? Imagine a prisoner on death row, a person who will be executed 24 hours from now. How would that prisoner feel? Do you think that that prisoner would for a fraction of a single second even smile? If he smiles, it means he's not thinking about his fate. It means he doesn't know what he's going to go through. But in 24 hours' time, my friend, that prisoner will have the lethal injection into his body, which will end his life. How would that person feel 24 hours prior to being killed? That person wouldn't enjoy life. He knows it's only a short 24 hours that are going to come. And those hours run like lightning. That's how fast they go. And in a single snap, that person is dead. Now, if you and I knew that in exactly 1 year's time we'll be dead, how would that affect our lives? If you knew, just say, for the sake of the argument, an angel descended on you, or a prophet or a messenger told you that in exactly 1 year's time you will be dead. How will you treat life? Will you go about partying and boozing and dating and so forth? I don't think so. Would it be a miserable life? Yes, it would. Now, the problem with our lives, my friends, is that we not only fear death. Death is something that should be feared. Everybody fears death. The advantage that the person has who knows that he'll die in a year's time is that he can prepare in advance. He'll go out there, fix up his accounts, go, make up with the friends that he lost touch with. He'll go be good with his parents. He fixes up his life in preparation for his final fate, in preparation for his death. Our problem, my friends, is that we don't even know that. So besides the fear that we will get when death descends on our heads, we will also get the shock. We will also feel that death has come unexpectedly. So what gives us hope? What makes us laugh? What makes us smile? I'll tell you what makes us smile. Even though we know we'll die. Even though we've seen the grave. Even though we know that we'll be carried in a casket by our friends and relatives. What makes us smile is exactly what makes a mentally retarded, spastic smile when you give him a lolly. If you've ever seen a person who's mentally retarded, the poor guy doesn't understand the difference between good and evil. He doesn't understand that when you give him a lolly, that's a good thing. And so he simply smiles, not because it's a lolly, because he's found some interaction. He smiles. If you slap him, he's going to smile again. In other words, he smiles regardless. We, my friends, with all due respect, are like spastics when it comes to our death and thinking about it. We live up life even though we'll be dead in a few years' time, or a few days' time, or even a few seconds' time, because we don't get it. What gives us hope? The answer is the day of judgment, resurrection. The hereafter gives us hope because, like I've said before, the hereafter gives hope to those who are oppressed. But it also gives you and I hope because we know that by being in these places where the name of Hussain is glorified, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us rewards in the hereafter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that who does good and cries on Imam Hussain will be taken to paradise. We expect God to deliver on His promise. That's what gives us hope. That's why we smile. That's why we're happy. Because we know no matter what goes on in this life, since I'm on the straight path, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not abandon me. And sometimes when I see these people standing on the edge of the grave of a loved one, people who don't believe in God, Christians, Jews, well, they believe in God, but those who don't even believe in the hereafter, when they're standing on the edge of that grave and they are bidding farewell their loved ones, their sons, their fathers, their mothers, their brothers, when that casket is going down 4 feet under into that grave, what gives them hope? Forget about us. Thank God for the belief in God. Thank God for the belief in the hereafter. What gives them hope? When they're departing that person, they know, according to their system of belief, that they will never get the chance to meet that person again. How could they stand there and stare at the body? I don't understand. Please, if you have an explanation, share it with me. What makes them stand there and not even cry? They will never meet that person again. And this is why nowadays it's sort of commonplace for even non-Buddhists to cremate the bodies. Have you seen that happening? In fact, a lot of Western societies are now seeing a growing trend of non-Buddhists and even Christians burning the corpses of their dead and deceased. They cremate the bodies. They go to crematoriums and they burn the bodies. Do you know why they do that? Well, 3 reasons. Could be a religious reason for Buddhists. They need to burn the body. The second reason is economical because it's cheaper to burn the body rather than bury it. And the third reason, which I think is the most important, and the biggest reason why a lot of people do that is because they get to keep the ashes. Because they know this person is going for good. They'll never be able to see that person again. So at least let's keep on to the ashes. They put the ashes in a facer, for example. They put it on a shelf. And they remember that person. This is my mother. This is my father. This is my son. This is my cat. This is my dog. Whatever. They get to hold on to a remnant of the deceased. They keep their clothes. They keep their bedrooms intact sometimes. And they have the ashes. Because they've lost all hope in ever being able to reunite with that person. Thank God for the belief in the hereafter. And the fact that we believe in the hereafter, the fact that my friends, my good brothers and my good sisters, the fact that we believe we will have the ability to face the consequences of our actions. Rahimallah man dhakara al-qa'ila min ali Muhammad. We need some more room over here. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala even though I realize it's not a full hearing. وقائد الغر المحجلين وإمام المسلمين ويحسوب المتقين أسد الله الغالب علي بن أبي طالب صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. على محبة البرعة الطاهرة والصديقة الشهيدة أم أبيها وروحه التي بين جنبي سيدة نساء العالمين فاطمة الزهراء صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. بتعجيل فرج صاحب العصر وإمام الزمان ومحور عالم الإمكان مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة بن الحسن العسكري صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. على محبة سيد الشهداء وريحانة رسول الله وشهيد كربلاء أبي عبد الله الحسين صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. So, back to the topic of death and what gives us hope because of our firm belief in the hereafter. The funny thing is, a lot of people fear death, despite the promises that we are given as believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in His doctrine and in His final religion, Islam, even though really there is nothing to fear. Worrying is a natural human phenomenon, and that's okay. But fear is for those who have sinned and those who have gone astray from the straight path set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of people fear death because they will end up in a grave. Now when we die, dying as a means of non-existence is a myth. Dying doesn't mean you'll become extinct, doesn't mean you'll become non-existent. Dying simply means going from one world into another. You won't go into a grave, you will escape your grave. It's not the grave you should fear. You will escape this body, which has stopped you from reaching your potential. As a God-fearing, God-believing human being, you shouldn't fear death because you will escape this grave of yours that you've been carrying around for all of your life. You will enter paradise. This is why, some people think that paradise and hell are some isolated spots, say, in a different galaxy or so. That's not the case. The tradition by Alulbayt states that when a person dies, his resurrection comes. When a person dies, his judgment day has just started. The grave will either be his paradise or his hellfire. It's not the grave you should fear. It's like once a person was just about to die, and in his will he said, "Bury me in an old cemetery, or in the old part of the cemetery." When they asked him why, when they asked him about the reason, he said, "Look, I want to be buried in an old grave so that when the angels come down and they start questioning me and asking me questions, who's your God, who's your prophet, I'll tell them, look, this is an old grave. How many times do you want to come down and question me? You've already done that in the past." It's not the grave that matters. When they come and question you, you won't be able to fool them because they'll come down and they'll ask you questions but not wait for the answer. All they need to do is look at your actions. You think when the angels come down and ask you, who is your God, oh Mahdi Almodarresi, you can just fool them and say, Allah, because you've memorized that in the past? It doesn't work that way. All they need to do is look at your actions and find out instantly whether you believe in God or not. Because our actions tell the story. If your actions were done in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, you can proudly say, God, Allah is my God. But if they were done in the way of the dollar, if they were done in the way of the buck and the pound, and in the way of filling my own stomach and satisfying my own desires, how could you dare say that Allah is my God? All you need to do is look at your forehead. It's written up there. We were given a chance in this world, my friends. We were given a chance. Death isn't the problem, it's what comes after death. As a famous scholar says, fear is something that should be preserved for what comes after death. It's not death you should fear. We were given a chance. And we should take responsibility before we are held responsible. We should make our actions accountable before we are tried in a court of justice, not a state of mercy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, He will be there to exercise His infinite justice. Mercy will be there, but the day of judgment is the day of justice. And when it comes to God's justice, we should really pray that God doesn't judge us in accordance with His justice. Because according to traditions of Alulbayt, a single minor sin can give you eternal damnation in hellfire. Why, do you ask? Is that just? Yes, it is. With all the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us, with all the rewards that He's bestowed upon us, with everything He's given, we yet go use His own tools, the things He gave us, to commit sins. Do we not deserve hellfire for that? Yes, we do. And that's something we should acknowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us everything, starting from our creation. The Prophet of Islam, peace and blessings be upon him and his holy progeny, asks his companions one day, sitting down, and he says, what was the first thing, the first ni'mah, the first reward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you and me? They all said something. This guy said, you, the other person said, my wife, this guy said, my kitchen, or whatever. And it wasn't until the commander of the faithful, the master of believers, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, got up and said, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me was the fact that He created me. He brought me into this world, and that is one thing for which, if we thank God for the remainder of eternity, we will never be able to fulfill that thank. We will never be able to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough for the fact that He created me. You've sometimes seen people who have certain problems in life, and they start whinging and whining and telling you, why is this, why is that, why did God do this to me? Na'udhu billah. Tell them, be quiet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you. And that's enough for you to be thankful for the rest of your life. A single sin can take us to hell, and that is in accordance with the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Him to try us with His mercy, because otherwise we'll get nowhere. There's no way on earth even messengers and prophets can enter paradise. Even them can't enter paradise without the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and His mercy is infinite. That's why we thank Him every single day. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. That's the second verse in the chapter of the Quran we read every single day, 10 times in our prayers. Surah Al-Hamd. It's called Hamd because you're supposed to learn from it how you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thinking about the fact that on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell His creations, يَوْمَ يُكْشَفُ عَنْ سَاقٍ وَيُدْعَوْنَ إِلَى السُّجُودِ فَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ. Allah will ask each and every one of us to prostrate on the day of judgment. But those who are not used to prostration can't do so. They cannot prostrate because they're not used to it. They don't know how to. They missed their chance. We were given a chance 70 years in this life, and not once did he prostrate before Allah. How does he expect to be able to prostrate on the day of judgment? We had this chance to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It looks like we need some more room over there. رحم الله من ذكر القائم من آل محمد. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the masses standing there before Him in the court of justice set up by the Almighty Lord, says, prostrate, فَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ. But they cannot prostrate. Because we had a chance in this world to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prayer, my good friends, prayer is a passionate conversation with the Almighty Creator. Some people think of prayer as this really confusing act. You can't focus, you can't think about it properly, you're not sure what to do, you're not sure what to think. It's a passionate conversation with the beloved Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All you need to do is ask Him. Because relations in this world are one of three types. It is either a relation of taking, like a child would take from his father and take from his mother. Take food, take shelter, take love. The other type of relationship is giving, like a father and mother would provide for their children. They don't expect anything in return, they just give and give and give. The third type of relationships is the mutual interest relation. In other words, scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. And that is the most dominant type of relationship in society. A lot of people have mutual interests, that's why they cooperate and work with each other. It's a mutual interest kind of relationship. When it comes to my relationship and your relationship with the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is a relationship of taking and nothing more. We take from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We take our very existence from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We take our food, we take our shelter, we take our time, we take our lives, we take our death, we take our paradise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم اهدنا قيامك والله ما ذكر الغائب من آل محمد. Imam Hussain, peace and blessings be upon him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you with paradise and the companionship of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a relationship of taking. Everything we have in our possession is taken from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, when I said that our very existence depends on Allah, I said that in the best possible way and in the widest scope of this word. Consider the example of a light bulb. When you have a light that's lit, that is because there is a flow of electricity. Please concentrate on this example. It makes everything make sense. The reason these lights and projectors are on and the reason they're lit is because there is a constant, continuous flow of electricity coming from the electric generators. Now imagine if this flow of electricity had to stop for a fraction of a second. What would happen? They would turn off for a fraction of a second. You might not feel it, but when the flow of electricity stops, the light goes out. For us as human beings and creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need that constant flow of creation from the initiator and the sustainer. This is why we call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the sustainer, because He has to sustain life in order for us to live. Us human beings and us creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, us slaves, are like something you would imagine in your mind. Say you imagine letter W, or you imagine a red car, or you imagine a tree. If you take your mind off of that car and letter and tree, even for a single second, it's gone. It goes away because you stop thinking about it. You stop the sustained flow of creation for that thing you imagine in your mind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need His sustained flow of creation for us to continue to exist. This is how much we need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for a person who needs His Creator so much, isn't it just good? Isn't it just appropriate and suitable for us to thank Him? Now, we want to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we thank Him? How do we thank Allah? How are we supposed to thank Him? When you write a letter to a president, and you leave a note at the very same time to a friend of yours, a colleague or a classmate, would the form of the letter addressed to the president and the note addressed to your colleague and classmate, would they be alike? Would they be exactly the same? No! When you're writing a letter to the president, you adhere to a certain formality. Am I wrong? You address him as Mr. President, or to the Queen, or to the King, and you treat that person with the utmost respect. When you ask him for something, you ask him, you beg him, you ask him in a very polite way. Whereas when you're asking your colleague or your classmate or your friend or your brother for something, you leave him a note and tell him, call me back, I need to tell you something. As simple as that. You don't go through formalities. When you're talking to a president, you need formalities. And when you're talking to God, don't you need formalities? The formality of talking and conversing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to pray in accordance with the teaching of the Holy Prophet and the immaculate, infallible Imams. They have taught us how to address Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They tell us that you should stand up before Allah, forget about everything, 5 times a day, in the morning, in midday, in the afternoon, at the beginning of the night, and just before bedtime. At midday, that is the peak performance period. You're at school, or you're in the marketplace. Everyone's going and coming, checks, money. People are coming up and down. Everyone is preoccupied with money, with life, with the peak performance period. That is the time you should leave everything aside. Go away from it all and say, Allahu Akbar. God is greater. God is greater. Greater than what? Greater than everything. Greater than money, greater than this world, greater than my desires, greater than my temptations, greater than whatever I need, greater than whatever I can see, greater than everything in existence. Allahu Akbar. Start with the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and start by saying He is greater without even mentioning what He's greater from. He's just greater. It's as simple as that. You stand up. You spend a few minutes a day praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now some people from an economic perspective, they might come to you and tell you, look, if we spend, say, half an hour a day praying, half an hour a day, how much time do you spend praying collectively? Let's say about 15 minutes, half an hour maximum. If each one spends half an hour a day, 1 billion people, 1 billion Muslims, if they spend each half an hour a day praying, that is 500 million hours of potentially productive work, right? A lot of communists used to use that argument against us. You people spend time praying, you could use that time in potentially productive avenues and advance society, help the economy, boost the economy. Instead of spending 500 million hours a day praying, do some work. Well, the answer to that misconception is this question. How much time do you spend per day eating? How much? An hour? Sometimes more? An hour and a half? 2 hours? Well, how about this argument? Why don't we stop eating and use that time in potentially productive work? We can't do that. Why? Why can't we do it? Because we need to consume food. We need to eat. And we need to pray, my friends, just as much as we need to eat. And even more. Because, again, think of it from an economical perspective. Those who pray are pledging their allegiance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 5 times a day. They are readjusting their position towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're saying Allahu Akbar, nothing is great, and everything I do will be in your way, O Allah. And that kind of person, you have this verse that talks about him. Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. A person who readjusts his position every single day 5 times is much less likely to sin and to cause harm to others, right? That person who spends half an hour a day praying uses the other time that he has on his hand more productively. Whereas people who lack a sense of direction, a sense of purpose in their lives, they go about their lives, they spend so much more time entertaining themselves, so much more time eating and drinking, so much more time not even thinking because they're intoxicated. Whereas we spend half an hour a day and we constantly remind ourselves that, look, I'm nothing but a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not a servant. I don't like this word. We're servants of Allah. No, we're slaves of Allah. We were created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a purpose, and we should damn sure serve this purpose. He brought us into this world, gave us this chance to pray. Thank Him. Thank Him just as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said. When the verse was revealed to the Prophet saying that I have forgiven all your sins, the past and the present, and the past and the future, the Prophet continued to pray, continued to fast, continued to do good deeds. What happened was one of his wives came up to the Prophet and said, look, this is your chance. God's already forgiven all your sins, even those to come. You don't even need to pray anymore. Come on. You know what the Prophet said? He said, أَفَلَا أَكُونُ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Should I not be a thankful servant and slave? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this life. He's given us everything in it. You know, sometimes, let me give you this small example as well. Sometimes someone gives you an apple for you to eat. What do? You thank him. You show gratitude. Thank you very much for the apple. I was hungry. Now he gave me this and I'm really, really thankful for you. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you an apple, He didn't just give you the apple. He gave you the apple. He gave you the teeth. He gave you the tongue. He gave you the digestive system. He gave you the life. He gave you the taste to enjoy it. He gave you everything. So when it comes to thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a simple prayer, half an hour a day, how hard is that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, stand up and say, Allahu Akbar. Notice the harmony between the physical movements and the words you utter. Allahu Akbar. You put everything behind you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the gracious, the merciful. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Thank you, O God. Thank you, thank you. No matter how many times we say that, we can't even thank Him for giving us the ability to say thank you. According to the traditions of Alulbayt. You thank Him for the ability that He gave you, for the guidance that He gave you. In the tradition that I mentioned before, when the Prophet asked his companions, what was the first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you? And the commander of the faithful said, the fact that He created us. Then the Prophet continues to ask, what was the greatest thing given to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And do you know what the commander of the faithful says? And hadani. He guided me. He guided me to people like the Prophet. He guided me to people like Imam Ali. He guided me to people like Imam Hussain alayhi salam. He guided me to my awaited Savior, Imam Mahdi, peace and blessings be upon him, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasten his reappearance. Otherwise, we would have all been lost. God knows what we would have been doing tonight instead of being here, glorifying the name of Hussein. God knows. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you to prostrate. When you prostrate, you are showing, you are expressing your humbleness before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the more you humble yourself before Allah, the more He will raise your status and position, both in society today, in this world, as well as the hereafter. And this is why the devil, the shaitan, hates the position of prostration. Because he didn't do it. And that's why he was damned for eternity. That's why he hates it. He says to you, do not prostrate. And in fact, some of the People back in the time of the Prophet, they came up to him and said, look, you're a good man. We love your religion. We love everything about it. But please, spare us one single ritual. What is that? Prostration. They said, we can't prostrate. So the Prophet said, why? They told him, because when we prostrate, look at their stupid mentality. They said, when we prostrate, our buttocks become higher than our heads. And so we can't take that. My head should be right up there. This person doesn't want to humble himself in front of his Lord. And a person like that is a mutakabbir, referred to in the Arabic language. He's arrogant. And an arrogant person never enters paradise. You pray before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every day to thank Him. Muslim ibn Aqil was Imam Hussein's cousin. Not only that, when Imam Hussain alayhi salam answered the call of the people of Kufa, who sent them 40,000 letters pledging their allegiance and asking them to come to the city of Kufa, he sent Muslim ibn Aqil as his messenger to go there, check out the atmosphere, see what's happening, and then send another letter to Imam Hussain telling him to come. When he sent him, he gave him a letter addressed to the people of Kufa. The letter said, I am sending you my brother. This is Imam Hussain talking. This isn't me. He doesn't exaggerate. He says, I am sending you my brother, my cousin, and the favorite of my household, Muslim ibn Aqil. Who was this man? May God's peace and blessings be upon his soul and his body. He goes to the city of Kufa. The last thing he does, the last thing just before he is killed, is that he prays. These people died in the cause of prayer, in the way of protecting prayer. These people died so you and I today would know how to pray. These people died so you and I would know that we should pray. The last thing he did was pray. Now at those times of desperation, when you know you're going to get killed in a few seconds, you'd really have to be a very high-ranking person in terms of spirituality and knowledge for you to ask for no favors but prayer, the ability to pray. But before I tell you the story, let me tell you the story of his two children. Muslim ibn Aqil had 5 children, 4 boys and 1 daughter. His daughter's name was Hamida. We'll tell his story afterwards. The 2 sons, he had 4 sons. 2 of them were killed on the side of Imam Hussain alayhi salam in Karbala. The other 2, by the name of Tahir and Muhammad, they actually went with Muslim ibn Aqil and they were held captive by Ubaydullah bin Ziyad, may Allah curse him, in the city of Kufa for 1 whole year. They were really young boys, like some of you here. They were about, one of them was 7 years old and the other was 6 years old. They were really young. After their father was killed, after Imam Hussain was killed, after everything was over, they were held captive. They stayed in a solitary confinement cell. I just want you to imagine the pain that these 2 had to endure. Their father was just killed, and instead of being shown some mercy as 2 orphans, they were held captive in a solitary confinement cell. They stayed there for a whole year. They used to get some food, 1 meal a day, 2 loaves of bread and a cup of water. And one day, Tahir says to Muhammad, he says, brother, let's just fast. He says, why? He said, look, they only give us 1 meal a day, so we might as well fast. To thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To thank Allah. So they stayed there for a while, and then one day, one of them tells the other, look, this person that brings us the food, he doesn't look like a bad guy. Let's talk to him. Let's ask him if he knows our father. Maybe he'll have some mercy on us, so let us go. So one day the man comes, he's an elderly person. Father says to him, he says, do you know God? Do you know the Prophet of Islam? He says, of course, I'm a Muslim. He said, okay, do you love his progeny? He said, yes, I love his progeny with all my heart. He said, okay, well, do you know that we are members of the progeny of the Holy Prophet? We are the 2 children of Muslim ibn Aqil. Our father was killed by you people of Kufa. And Imam Hussain, our uncle, was killed in Karbala. Everyone else was killed along with him. We are his sons. So the man starts crying and says, I'm so sorry, I didn't know about this. I only work here because I couldn't find another job. And he ends up releasing them from prison. So they leave the city at midnight, pitch black nights, so no one could see them. They leave and they go out to the desert. They reach an area where there's a river flowing. They sit there for a while to take a rest. A woman comes by. It's a long story, I'm cutting it short. The woman walks by and sees these two beautiful boys that look like jewels. And she says, who are you? They tell her the story. They say we are the children of Muslim al-Aqim who was killed in Kufa. So she takes them. She was a slave. She takes them to the house of her master, a woman who also loved the progeny of the Holy Prophet. They go there. This woman embraces them. She helps them. She gives them a room to stay in. She gives them food. At the end, what happens is that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad assigns a 30,000 dinar reward, 30,000 gold coins on the head of these two young boys. The son of that woman in whose house they used to live, he finds out about them. So he goes there, again, I said it's a long story, I want to cut it short. He comes up to these two little boys and he wants to kill them because he wants that reward. The vicious animal doesn't care about humanity anymore, it's about the money, it's about his stomach. So he comes up to the two boys and he wants to kill them. Muhammad says to him, look, please, don't kill my brother Talha, kill me first. I know you're going to kill us anyway. Take us by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. He says no. He says, okay, if you're going to kill us anyway, kill me before you kill my brother. He says, why should I do that? He said, because when we left the city of Medina, my mother took the hand of my brother and she put it in my hand and said, you should take care of your little brother. So if you're going to kill us anyway, I want you to kill me first. I don't want to break that promise that I made to my mother. He kills them, he takes the heads, he puts them in a bag and takes to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is the most vicious animal with a heart made of stone. Yet when he saw those two small heads, he said, what did you do? He said, I killed them because you put that reward on. He said, I didn't say kill them. Kill this man, take him and kill him. So they take that man who killed the two sons of Muslim ibn Aqil and they kill him. Muslim ibn Aqil was a man whose entire family was annihilated either in Karbala or afterwards. He sacrificed everything he had in the way of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. He enters the city of Kufa while he has 40,000 men around him. All of those who sent letters to Imam Hussain, sometimes signed by more than one person, saying that we pledge our allegiance. But he prays one prayer at the mosque. They issue an arrest warrant on Muslim ibn Aqil. After the prayers, he looks back and there is not a single person. He is left stranded, abandoned by his own supporters and his own followers. He walks out of the mosque, there is no one there to take care of him. Everyone closes their door in his face. They don't want to welcome this man on whose head there is an arrest warrant issued. He walks around, he doesn't know anyone, he doesn't have anyone. Until he reaches a house, he stands by the door. There's a woman standing by the name of Fawa. He says, could I please have a cup of water? You know, you'd feel sorry for anyone when they ask you for a cup of water. They're thirsty. Except for those who killed Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They didn't have any mercy in their hearts. So Fawa says, yes, I'll bring you a cup of water. She goes in the house, she comes out, and she gives him the cup. After he drinks, he doesn't have anywhere else to go. He stays there. She says, look, stranger, I don't allow you to stay at the gate of my house. Please, go back to your house. Don't stay here. He said, but I don't have anyone. I have no one in the city. She says, who are you? He says, I am Muslim ibn Aqil, the messenger of Allah, Abdullah ibn Hussain. She says, oh my master, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was you. Please come in the house because he doesn't have any other place to go. He goes in. Her son, again, he was a mercenary by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. He goes and tells the authorities that he's there. They come up to the house, they fight him. Thousands of men. In fact, according to one tradition, over 1,000 men were fighting a single man. A single person was fighting them by himself because he had the power of faith. At the end, he is heavily wounded. They take him on the government house on top of the building. But because he was so much wounded, he was thirsty. He asks for a cup of water. They give him the cup. He wants to drink. As soon as he puts his mouth, his lips on the cup, it is filled with blood because of the wounds that he had inflicted in his mouth. It is filled with blood. He gives it back, takes another one. Again, it is filled with blood. He gives it back and takes a third one. It is filled with blood again. He says, I'm not supposed to drink any water. I'm supposed to die thirsty, just as Imam Hussain will die thirsty. So they take him up on the top of the building. They put him up there. There are people standing underneath, people sitting and looking up. Some of them say they will release him. The other one says they will imprison him. The other one says, no, they'll probably put him in prison and in solitary confinement. And while they were talking about this and contemplating on what's going to happen, they see a decapitated body falling down without a head. After that, they take his body, tie his feet with a rope, and they drag him around the city. The messenger of Mahdi Almodarresi, at the last second though, just before they killed him, he said, before you kill me, I want to pray 2 rak'at. He stands there and he prays. Then he starts crying. The man says to him, a person like you, a person with so much faith, you shouldn't be crying. You believe in paradise. He said, I swear to God, it is not about myself that I'm crying. I'm crying for the man who is coming along with his entire family. And the man who will be killed along with his children. The man whose children will be orphaned. I'm crying for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. He's killed. The news reaches Imam Hussain alayhi salam. When he gets the horrible news, he goes to his sister, says, Sister Zainab, bring me the daughter of Muslim al-Hamida. So they bring this little girl. She comes to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. He starts kissing her. He wipes his hands on her head. Then she goes up, Uncle, why are you treating me the way you treat orphans? Has anything happened to my father? Imam Hussain says, I will be your father, sweetie. I'll be your father, and my daughters will be your sisters. Another cousin of hers, another relative of Muslim Ali. She comes up to Imam Hussain alayhi salam just before he goes to the battlefield. She says, oh uncle, my father and my uncles have left, and they all promised to bring me water. I'm thirsty, oh uncle. Imam Hussain knows that they're already dead. They're already gone. They're never going to come back and bring water. She says, they promised me. Do you know what Imam Hussain says? He says, sweetie, I'll be joining them soon and I'll tell them about your thirst. I'll tell them that you're so thirsty. And then she goes, but uncle, you're going to go and come back. It's going to take such a long time. Could you please take me to them? He says, sweetie, but if I take you, who's going to bring you back? I'll be joining you, sweetie. ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. إلهنا إنا نسألك ونذكرك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله 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 يا الله. اللهم إنا نسألك بحق فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها أن تعجل في فرجهما بزماننا يا الله. اللهم اجعلنا من أصحابه وأعوانه وشيعته ومحبيه والذاكرين عنه والممتثلين بأوامره ونواهيه وارزقنا الشهادة في سبيلك بين يديه وتحت لوائه يا الله. اللهم اقض حوائجنا الدنيوية والأخروية. اللهم أعنا إلى أوطاننا سالمين إلى سالمين. اللهم اهد ديوننا واشف مرضانا خاصة المرضى المضمورين. اللهم وتقبل من المؤسسين. اللهم وأيد وسدد علماءنا العاملين خاصة سماحة آية الله العظمى السيد علي السيستاني. اللهم وفقه لما تحب وترضى. اللهم